John, what's going on, man?
Hey, how are you?
Well, that's an interesting question
Oh,
because you and
that's
I were
right.
talking right before this.
I shouldn't have asked that. Yeah.
No, that's okay. Yeah, for those of you guys in the audience, I guess I know we're over 1,000 episodes now. And I was telling John that the podcast I recorded right before his, I had to get up and run to the bathroom and puke my guts up.
That is I'm so sad.
You know what though? Like I said, I kind of pride myself on not getting sick.
Yeah.
And yesterday, we had this, and yesterday meaning I know we're recording this quite a bit ways from the release date, but we celebrated my wife's big family Christmas, and I ate a ridiculous amount of bad food. And even like last night, I was like, oh, like my stomach, I was like, that wasn't the best idea. And then I kind of went to bed. You wake up with that full feeling. You're like, I just don't feel right. And I woke up this morning. I'm like, I don't feel right. Something's not right. And then I threw up and I'm like, oh, I feel better. I feel good now. So I think whatever it was, it's gone now, but it was probably just something I ate.
Yeah. Well, I know how that is. You never know. On those holidays, you kind of splurge
Yeah,
and you let your guard down. And I hope you feel better. If you need to abandon plans mid interview, that's okay with me.
I'm good. Totally good. What I really love to do though is just dive right into this. So, a couple of quick warm up questions with you. How about that?
Sure.
Yeah. So, I know you're in a blended family. You have three bonus kids, one biological kid, son,
Yes.
who's 7. Um, but a man who's raising, four humans, right? And even though you're in a blended family, I'm sure you have touch points and that kind of thing with these children.
Sure.
But what is something you and your wife like to do for fun?
Oh, good question. The first answer is I have two answers to that. The first is bike.
Okay.
We enjoy biking. Um, it gives us a time to uh, talk in ways that we don't normally talk. I don't know if it's the motion as we bike side by side down a path and go for whether it's a half an hour or 2 hours. I don't know if it's the flow, but we get into meaningful conversations in a way that we don't normally do in a car or that we do just in ordinary run of the mill life. And it becomes very meaningful for us and enriching. And for us, it's been great. And we like to be physical and active. And we sort of have divergences in what we like to do in terms of the physical uh, activities, but the biking is where we converge and really enjoy it for both the physical and the engagement that we have together. That's number one. The other thing we have a we love discussing faith topics.
Hmm.
And so invariably in our bedroom, she's got piles and piles of faith oriented books. And I have about 1/3 of what she might have piled up at any given time. And, but whether we're driving or sitting down for dinner or it just really stimulates our conversations on meaningful things that are sort of bigger than what's the here and now. I think it's a, I think it's an, I don't know if this is the right word, an elixir, or it's a, it greases the skids, I think, to get into more meaningful conversation and content in
Hmm.
our lives.
Yeah. No, I really like that. I have a theory for you on the biking thing if you want to hear it.
Yes.
So one of the things that we teach in Dad Edge is how to create an environment of psychological safety where you can have deeper conversations. And it has to do with our physical, mental, and emotional environment. So we always tell men, if you want to create psychological safety and have deeper conversations, number one rule of thumb is be side by side,
Mm.
because nose to nose, toes to toes, that incites perhaps sometimes subconsciously me against you, even if we're talking about things that we kind of like or whatever.
Ah,
Yeah. So like even if my wife and I go out to dinner, we'll try to sit next to each other versus across from each other, or we'll at a 90-degree angle. And
yes.
then or if we have a triggered discussion that we need to talk about, we'll go on a walk with our dog and we'll walk hand in hand. Because if you really think about it, if you watch the UFC or boxing, it's that famous face off where they're toes, nose to nose, toes to toes, and you can just feel the heat and the tension
Yes.
between those two guys. Now, on the flip side, the way a football team walks out to the coin toss is there's 4 or 5 teammates. They walk out shoulder to shoulder, side by side, and it's our team against yours, right? And they feel a certain way, a camaraderie that, hey, these are my men. We're going to battle together, and we're going against this. So, so that's number one, is being side by side, and number two is doing something that's adventurous and that's an experience, right? That's not just you're sitting down having a cup of coffee, but you're actually experiencing something that's physical, mental, and emotional, which is biking. So you like it,
Yes.
you're physically doing it, your endorphins are going. Some of the best conversations my wife and I have had, and some of the best connections we've had, is actually in the gym working out, like where we're spotting each other, and that kind of
Interesting.
thing. Yeah. So it's fascinating that you bring that up, because we always try to push more and more men. They're like, don't do the dinner thing. Like, the dinner thing has been done like a gazillion times. Like, do biking together, right? Do
Yes.
something different together.
Yeah. Very interesting. And I'm really glad you brought up the sitting side by side on a date or at dinner, because I had abandoned that, not on purpose, in the last 5, 6 years. For a while there, in our first few years, Megan and I, my wife, we would indeed sit side by side at a restaurant, and it had a different quality. You're right, to the conversation
Mm,
and just to the connection. So that's good. I'm glad you brought that up.
yeah. That's so cool that you guys do that, though.
I'll activate that again here soon.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that.
I know we're going to talk about your book, which I love your book. And obviously, you and I being entrepreneurs ourselves, which is Ellis's Lemonade Startup, teach our kids habits of entrepreneurship. So, in our house, we have 4 boys, and I think you'll really love this experience that we had with your book. Because I was reading it to my 9-year-old, and
Oh,
my 15 and 16-year-old, they're like, we're going to be business owners. We ain't working for anybody but us. Like, that's their attitude. And when we talk about what do you want to grow up and do, we always talk about what is the work that makes you come alive, right? What are the
perfect.
problems? Yeah. And what are the problems you want to solve for other people, right? That's how we think. That's how we talk about quote unquote career and job and business owning. For my 9-year-old, this was fascinating. So I read him the book, and on the next night on our way to soccer practice, he goes, Dad, and he just turned 9. So he's like kind of new, right? He's like, Dad, he goes, how do you make money at a business? And I'm sitting there like, how do I explain this to its 9-year-old? And I go, okay. I was like, here's how you make money in a business. You bring value to somebody else and you solve their problems. He's like, is that it? I was like, yeah, that's it. I was like, you remember the lemonade book? I was like, what was the problem that the kids had? He was like, well, they were thirsty. Exactly. They were thirsty. And Eli, he provided lemonade, solved their problem. It's like no different. He's like, well, how do you solve problems in Dad Edge? I was like, well, we have men who want to learn skills to have a better marriage with the kids' mommies. I was like, we teach the men skills on how to be better daddies. I was like, all those things that are so important for men. And I was like, we teach them that stuff. So we solve those problems. And he's like, and you just saw like the light bulb. He's like, oh, he's like, wonder what problems I can solve. And he's just like, you could tell as the wheel was just like, went to like Doc Brown's 88 miles an hour, back in time thing. It was so cool.
Yeah, that's so great. You were explaining that you were on the way to soccer and he was sitting there, and he started to ask you that question. And that's exactly the point of the book. One of the key
Yeah.
points of the book is to just plant the seed,
Yeah.
create a context to have those types of discussions. And that's a great example of how I think it can activate or be a catalyst to a child's thinking, just for
Mhm.
the very first time, just bringing out the topic right there.
Yeah. Just, I
So
mean,
that,
you don't have to get in P&Ls and taxes and revenue and COOs. You could just be like, just solve other people's problems, bring value to somebody else.
yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah.
terrific.
So tell me about just the idea of this book, before even words were written on paper. What was on your mind and heart?
Well, for the last 7 years I've been reading every night. Both my wife and I have been reading every night children's books to our 7 year old. And I've just loved doing that. And through that process, you we've got, I don't know, 100 children's books, and you just realize that, 5 or 10 of them are much, much better than others, right? And it just drew my curiosity to why is that? And I'm just, by my nature, I'm a creator at heart. I love launching new products. So I'm always in that mode. But I also love, uh, being a father
Yeah.
and creating situations by being intentional and uh, looking for opportunities to discuss things that are important to fathers to instill in their children. So there's sort of all that as a backdrop, and then for years I've considered writing a book to help adults launch new products. And I have a website that does that, and I even have an app that does that, and so on. But I've always wanted to write a book. I like the idea of having a tangible book that you can leave behind, as a legacy, or just, pass it on to people, sell it, what have you, create that value and offer it. But that would take, I have a very busy life, as all men do, with families. And it just struck me, going night after night or every other night reading a children's book to my son, why don't I just take a stab at writing a children's book? And when I do things, I've launched other products before, and even if I don't know what I'm doing, I can quickly kind of move forward on it and get the resources I need to do something. Um, and instead of spending hours and days and months writing a real book, I thought, well, why don't I just take a stab for 4 hours or 2 hours and write a children's book? Because sometimes I would just tell my child a story. I would make up a story, and I got in the habit of kind of seeing whether he's engaged or not, right? You start and you pull him into the story, and you can see whether I would pause and then they would fill in the blanks or wait for you to say the next thing. And I knew that, at least sort of my trial and error, that I was capturing his attention before I even thought about writing a book. But anyway, I got some advice, searched the internet. Long story short, I just chose to write it, and I wrote it. I found an illustrator and I self-published it. And there's a lot more detail behind it. But those two drivers being, number one, I always wanted to write a book. And number two, just, creating a context to communicate important values to my child, were the two drivers.
Yeah. And I really want to talk about the value part of it, right? Because I think a lot of us, and I think this is the wrong move, right? I always tell my kids, don't start a business for the sole purpose of like, I'm going to make a crap ton of money, right? Right. Don't do that. What you want to do is create a business that solves problems that you're passionate about solving, and maybe you've even suffered through them yourself, and you desperately wanted the solutions that you bring to bring to somebody else. So it's almost like if you were to bring the solution to your former self in a way,
Yes.
the things that light you up. Within Dad Edge, we have a guy, and I'm not gonna say his name for confidentiality, but we have a mastermind for our guys. And Dad Edge, as far as from a financial aspect, does very well. But I purposely and intentionally stay away from the conversation of our revenue. Like, I purposely do things like I don't go to the bank. I have to pay attention to it at least once a month just to know where we're at, first payroll and that kind of thing. But what really lights me up is when I see a man, and this man, he listens to the podcast, he knows who he is, hasn't been able to speak to his daughter in I think a year or two, has rekindled a relationship with his teenage daughter. He's now having sex with his wife again. He's intimate with his wife again. He's in the gym every morning by 3:58 a.m. Health was a big thing for him that he just couldn't get there, right? And he is just dominating over the past 6, 8 weeks. Like, he's taking photos of all these things, except for the sex thing, obviously, but like him in the gym and him with his daughter and on a date night with his wife. And he's just like lit up. And that is the ROI, I think is beautiful, right? So like I think it's
You mean
so
your ROI
yeah.
as
And
a
his too.
business
Yeah.
owner,
Yeah.
which is that you're sort of crossing over,
Yeah.
having a passion for something, a deep desire to do something with solving a need.
Right. Which I think there's a gazillion businesses out there of like, we do this because we make a lot of money. Right. And that's I always tell the kids, be a values driven company, be a values driven entrepreneur. So it's fascinating that you even use those words, be aligned with your values. So what does that mean? What have you taught your own kids even through writing this book?
Well, I think it's just being really, for me, from my perspective, being really present with the child and being very intentional as a father in um, sort of assessing who they are, um, and tapping into and looking for signals from them on their interests, their desires. And you said it really well, which is what lights them up, right? That's a great way to put it. What lights them up? Because you could line up 10 activities in front of them, and there are those two activities that really light them up much more beyond the 8 activities. It's the Pareto principle or Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, right? They're going to get so much more out of um, a certain environment or a certain condition or a certain activity. Um, and it's interesting, and maybe you could share more about this as well, but each child is different, right?
Yeah.
And they're just they're an independent entity, and they're so organically themselves, right? I mean, they're influenced by their environment and situation and so on, and carry some of the maybe uh, talents that you or your wife might bring as by nature. Um, but for me, it's being very inquisitive and curious and intentional about spotting those light up moments for them, and then just nurturing that with them. So if you see it, you bring it up. You make if I'm self-aware, if I'm aware of what I see, I try to plant the seed in him to acknowledge it, and as well as my older stepchildren, to at least help them become more self-aware that that's a thing. Because a lot of times I think we as adults, maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, we grow up and we don't realize the talents that we really have. I mean the core talents, because a lot of times, I mean, I work with solo entrepreneurs often, or I have, and they don't know the talents that they have right in front of them. They lost track and lost sight of those things that are those crown jewels that they have lost sight of, because they don't think they're so close to them. These talents, they don't even know that they're a talent. So and you have to sort of remind them or call it out to them, so then they can start leveraging those talents more deliberately. And I think, as for children, anyway, that's what I try to do, is um, see those things, call them out, tell them what I see. And it's interesting, the next few days, you start seeing them experiment a little bit more with those, with those things. And, it's a process. In 3 years, it might be something totally different, or it might turn into something else. But anyway, it's being inquisitive about that, um, calling it out, um, you know, encouraging them, whatever that might be, and building upon that.
Do you have a story that you can share with us and just kind of why you gel on that? I had a parenting expert come on the podcast and he talked about um, reprimand, in private and with calm, right? And then when you praise with public, praise in public, and also tie it to a value driven characteristic trait.
Ah,
So like for
very,
instance, yeah, it's very different. So like for instance, quick story that I had was, my 9-year-old opened up the door for this lady. We were going into this breakfast place and he opened up the door for this lady. And I said, man, I was like, that was so kind of you. That is something that a very kind young man does, right? So like the kindness aspect, right? Or I saw I saw him say, my wife and I were right in the middle of talking, and he's like, "Mom, Dad, excuse me, I have a question." And I was like, "Man," I was like, "that was so respectful that you use those nice words like that, man. That's fantastic." So it's like respectful, kindness, all those value driven things. And I'm really curious about what that looks like from like teaching your kids value driven business and pointing those things out.
yeah. Well, the first thing that pops into my head, and I don't know if I could tell you the absolute clear story of it. I might be able to, but just it must have been 3 weeks ago. I was with my son Levi, and he, I'm an athlete. I grew up an athlete. I developed my identity as an athlete, and I've got other sort of core uh, talents as well, but that's one of them. But my son, he's not oriented that way. He has other skills, he has other interests and that sort of thing. And one of the things he likes to do is make believe. And he's 7 and he loves acting and performing and things like that, suffice it to say. And he's got a natural ability for hearing music a certain way and and performing and let's say acting or even directing, right? Film directing or play directing, or he just has that natural talent. And what happened? Let's see. We're sitting down at the kitchen table, and we were in the basement before that playing. Oh, this is what it was. He was playing the piano down the basement, and I was upstairs. It was just the two of us in the house. He was downstairs playing the piano, and I was loving listening to it. And he was just, you know, freelancing. He was just winging it. He doesn't know how to play the piano, but he can make sounds that make sense. And I secretly set up my mobile phone. I set it down. I do this fairly often to capture the moment, right? And in fact, what I did was, in this instance, I had the video playing, so I snuck around the corner and I held my camera out around the corner, not me, and I was looking at I was watching the camera, and he was directing music, right? And he looked like a conductor, like he looked like it. So he's been observing it somehow or somewhere,
Yeah.
right? And I was holding my camera out, be around the corner, and somehow he looked and he saw the camera and he shut down,
Mm.
right? And he kind of slowly moved off to a closet door, and I turned off the camera. I felt bad about it, and I went down there. I said, and I right away I tried to encourage, like, wow, that was really great. It looked like you were really doing that well. How did you learn that? That sort of thing. And he sort of downplayed it and he was kind of shy about it. And then 10 minutes later, it was sort of lunchtime. So he and I went upstairs, and I was just thinking about this more. And he, so we were eating, blah, blah, blah. And it just struck me. I said, I'm going to bring this up. And I said, Levi, do you remember when you were downstairs conducting music? You were pretending you were doing that. And he said, yeah. And I said, I have to tell you, you looked like, honestly, where did you learn that? Because you looked like you were really doing it, like with your hands and this and that. And I said, in the music that you were playing before then, I said, I know you don't know how to play the piano, but it was making sense to me,
Hmm.
as if it was, you could hear, even if it's a backdrop for a soundtrack or something. So, and I said, and I also recalled him kind of slipping away in, I don't know, embarrassment or something. And I said to him at the island in our kitchen, I said, by the way, Levi, if I noticed that you kind of walked away being sort of uncertain or not sure about that, I said, do not let anybody kill that spark that's in you, that you love to do and that you notice and that you want to sort of do. Um, and and I just sort of tried to reinforce that. I said, don't let anybody take that away from you. Never feel ashamed of something that you have a natural inclination to do, or to try something, to, because if kids at school start thinking that's strange or weird or something. So anyway, that's a long story. I'm sorry it went so long, but essentially I wanted him to know that I do think that he's got something there naturally, and that I wanted to encourage him to do that and to sort of build up his strength and courage to try to resist any sort of kids thinking that's weird or funny or that sort of thing.
That is such a good story. And by the way, no apology needed. I'm so glad you talked about it in such that way, because for him, I think what a lot of parents would do, they'd be like, "Oh, it's so cute. Like, look, we made a video," and then like they might even be like, "Oh, like," and then the kid might be embarrassed, right? Like even deep down, like even if there's a smile, like I think of my 6-year old, who's kind of like that. He's gonna be 7 here really soon next month, and well, actually, it's kind of funny as we launch this podcast, he's 7 today, and
Happy birthday.
right, happy birthday, and he. Even if we're like really excited for him, like he'll get embarrassed. We're like, "Oh no, man! Like, own that, right? That is so cool. Like own that you're doing that thing or whatever it was so I think it's really cool that you took the time to not only record him, but I think a lot of parents would stop there, but also to have the conversation with him around the kitchen island and share with him why it was meaningful and why moving forward it's important for him to embrace that and to keep going with that.
Yeah.
That's very cool. I want to ask you a question that has nothing to do with your book, and it's just something that I've picked up as you're talking. Um, you just seem like you are a very calm, compassionate dad, and I'm sure you have your moments. I'm sure you have your moments, but you come across to me as like if you were my dad and I was Levi, right? I'm sorry, right?
Levi.
Levi.
Yeah.
Okay. I get the sense, and I've only known you for about 30 minutes, but I get the sense that my dad, what I see in him is what I get. There isn't like these tremendous ebbs and flows of like uncertainty and like, or maybe even craziness, or like he's calm, he's confident, cool, he encourages me. And if that is the case, which I think it probably is, where does that come from you? And did it come from your own upbringing, or did it come from just this? You started this podcast with like, I always wanted to be a dad. Like, I don't, it's funny, this is a dad show. But the one person that I can remember saying that was with just as much swagger as you did was Chris Gardner from Pursuit of Happiness. And that guy is all about charisma and all about like saying what he means. And he was just like, Larry, let me tell you something. I knew one thing when I became a dad, and my kids would know their dad. And he had this awesome laugh. Like that was the one show, man. I think I listened to that show 3 times. It was only because I wanted to hear him laugh because it's so contagious. But I don't know. That's just the vibe that I get. Is that pretty accurate?
I think it is. And thank you for saying that. I think when somebody actually sort of sees those qualities and calls it out, like we were just talking, everybody needs that.
Yeah.
Right. So thank you. Where did I get it? That's a good question. I think in a nutshell, I got it from my mom.
Okay.
And I got part of it from my dad as well. Uh, but my mom is very present. And I think of course I'm not perfect, right?
Sure.
Um, and my wife will sort of obviously call that out too. Um, but yeah, I think I got it from my mom. I think, you know, she's always sort of, she finds the good in
Mm.
things.
Okay.
She's very good at finding the crown jewel in the noise and the mess.
So
And
maybe
and
looks at life through an appreciative lens.
yes,
Yeah. Okay. Keep
very
going.
very
Yeah.
grateful.
Cool.
Yeah. Um, and so I would say, we all carry on those things from our parents, but and maybe it goes way back on her side of the family, right? But yeah, I think. But also, Larry, I think, um, I got married older, and so um, I think that has helped because once you kind of know who you are, um, you can be there uh, and be more deliberate, intentional as a father. And God bless fathers that are 20 years old and 24 years old that have that quality too, as I'm sure they exist. But for me, I've wanted to be a dad for so long and finally became a dad later in life that I knew that the moments would count.
Mm.
The moments would count. And when you finally get there, at least I try and I fail. Um,
Wait a second. You're not a perfect. I only have perfect dads on this show. So
oh,
like,
shoot.
I
Well,
should
nice to
probably.
talk to you. We'll see. Um, yeah, I'll have to leave.
Right.
But no, I think that is, I'm just grateful for that. I'm just grateful for um, being older and being more intentional and thoughtful, at least trying,
Hmm.
right? Trying and getting back up when you fail. That's for sure. Um, but I think it's those two pieces
That's really cool, man.
because when you finally get there to be that father and you're so aware of it, I try those little nuances of the day or idiosyncrasies or
Mhm.
qualities or characteristics or even more specifically in those moments. I mean, these moments are every day. The child is just this developing entity and human, and they've got their own qualities and skills and personality and temperament and all this, and just uh it's just all these moments are just so wonderful. So anyway, I'm starting to babble there.
You're not, because what I think, what I really love to do as a dad sometimes, and I've gotten better at this. And so I have what we call the bigs and the littles. So I have 15, 16, and 7 and 9. And one thing I've noticed with the younger two is I was so consumed with like the minutia of the first two. Like, I got to get it right, and I got to go by the book, and it's got to be this, and it's got to be that. And what I did is I did a really poor job of enjoying it. You know, one of the things that we did, what I've done over the years is I've here and there, over the past 25 years, I've competed in bodybuilding shows, and I gave it up back in 2011. And I wasn't even all that great at it. I mean, I'd always place in the top 5, but I never did it for like a trophy. I just was like, I need something that's going to motivate me to get in shape. So like, what else is motivating than being pretty much naked on stage in front of hundreds of people? That will motivate somebody, right? So I gave that up. And my 14-year-old, well, he's 15 now, last year told me, we were going through what he wants to do in 2022. He wants to do a bodybuilding show, and he wanted to do it with me. And I was like, wow. And I was like the fattest I've been in a long time, and somewhat healthy, but also definitely not near competing. And he's like, I want us to do this together. And I'm like, huh, okay. But the reason I shared that comparison is because um, I always, when I did a show, I never enjoyed it. Like, I never enjoyed it. It was just like it was such a mental and physical grind. And it's like, oh my God, if I have to eat chicken one more time, or if I have to do cardio one more time, I'm going to shoot somebody. And here's the funny thing, like you get on stage, you see those pictures and you're like, God bless, like, that was the best shape I've ever been in. And I didn't even enjoy it. I didn't even realize it because all I was focused on was doing this thing. Right. And with my son, I told him before we even started, I was like, this is going to be a grind, but it doesn't have to be. And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, let's enjoy it. I was like, it's going to be tough. This diet is no joke, man. The workouts are no joke, and we're not going to feel like doing stuff. I was like, but let's zoom out when we feel that way and enjoy and embrace the moment. Like, wow, we get to do this together. Are you kidding me? How cool is that?
Yeah.
And I've taken that same approach, not always great at it, still fall on my face with it. But I've tried to take that same approach with my little guys of like, they're not going to be 7 and 9 in this, and they want me in their rooms and reading them stories about lemonade stands forever. In fact, I have proof of that with my teenagers. So I am just going to relish in the fact that I get to do this still because I'm going to turn around tomorrow and this is not going to be so. So I think it's zooming out, slowing things down, looking, what your mom did and what you do. Look through the lens of an appreciative eye and enjoy. Just enjoy sometimes. It's all our job has to be from time to time. So I love that you brought that up, man.
Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, those moments are so important. And the other thing too is I don't know. I think we all have tragedy in our life, right? We've all
Sure.
experienced trouble and tragedy. And for me, when I was in ninth grade, I had a sister who was in 10th grade who died in a car accident, a
Oh
drunk
my
driver.
gosh.
And she was my only sister, my only sibling. And I was in ninth grade. And that really formed me to be a little bit more, it just set the context, I think, about what's important and what's not important. And I think that's another, I think, part of it, at least for me. But I think, those, and I've always felt this, tragedy and discomfort has a silver lining. And I think it multiplies in ways it can, much far beyond the tragedy. And maybe you're a good example of that, Larry, right? You're probably a perfect example of that. I think I read a little bit about you and your growing up and your disappointment in your experience of fatherhood as a child, right? And now look at you. I mean, for crying out loud, right? You've multiplied that times 100 or 10,000, and we all benefit from that. And so I think for me at least, and like I said, we all have our tragedies. That was the game changer for me, because when you see other people struggling over the smaller things in life, and you've moved beyond the tragedy, you can sort of, I think, assess things a little bit differently, and not worry about the whether you bought the wrong shoe size, or your car has a flat tire or something. So anyway, I think that has benefited me too by being a father. And my wife too is such a tender-hearted person. And seeing her in her moments of just being so childlike in her motherhood to all of our children, my stepchildren and my child, it makes you stop and think. And marriage is a great way to kind of see yourself anew. And I think my wife has really helped me do that. You can see yourself and where you can improve in so many different ways as well. So
That's so cool, man. This is such a joy to talk to you. I'm so sorry to hear about your older sister. That is absolutely tragic. And I can also see how that created that also that beautiful lesson for you moving forward in your own life. And thank you for blessing us with obviously a tragic experience, but also reminding us of like, well, wait a second. Yeah, life is very fragile and it could be changed or taken from us at any moment. Um, as we wrap up here, how about we go on a journey? Cool with that?
Excellent.
Okay. I haven't asked this question very often lately, but I always enjoy it. And don't feel the pressure of having to give a perfect answer, or just whatever your heart and gut tells you. I want you to picture for a moment. How old are you?
55.
55. I want you to picture 20 years from today. You're 75. Levi's 27. You and your wife have been married, Megan, correct?
Correct.
For another 20 years. And you're sitting around the dinner table. Levi is there with either his fiance, his wife. Maybe he's got a kid, maybe he doesn't. Your three other bonus children are there with their families. And you just look at this beautiful dinner table, right, of everybody there. And you have a moment to just look around at everybody and just with that appreciative eye that you have, right, that you've had for so long, that you learned from your mom, you ask everybody at the table a question. You take your glass and you ding it. And you're like, I've got a question for everybody. If you could share with me or share with each other, what were some of the most beautiful moments that we've experienced together as a family? What would they be telling you? What would Levi be telling you in particular? What would Megan be telling you? Your three bonus kids. What would they be saying?
That heck of a good question. And I love the question. I don't know if I know the answer, what the answer would be, but it's a great exercise to think about, to keep the end in mind, to shape things going forward, if you will. But your question, right, is what do I think they would say? I think I think it would be these everyday moments of joy, the simple, ordinary, not major planned events, not going to Hawaii, not going to Florida, not going to, Disney World, which is a plan that we have here shortly. Um, I think it would be the moments sitting around the table, the laughter, the little pieces that we pick up now and again. I don't have a specific answer, but I know it would be those precious moments because I feel that way, right? I feel like that's the way I would answer it. The smile, the care, the quality that one child has, um, and just the examples that they've exhibited that quality over the years. I'd love to think about that a little bit more. And of course we'll hang up and I'll go, hey, I'll send you an email or something.
Yeah.
But just give me 10 seconds more to think about that.
Sure.
Because I like the question. I think there are times, and I don't know, they'll probably be more joy oriented. So I'm probably off on this. But there are times when the noise is everywhere, the chaos of school, of work, of life, of activities, where you stop, whether it's a moment driving in the car and taking an opportunity to say something to one of the kids that you really mean.
Mhm.
Maybe, but probably not. Maybe those were the times that register in some way, shape, or form. And frankly, I wish I could do that more. So again, this has been a valuable conversation for me. How
I
about
think
you? What would you say?
it's very much the exact same thing. Because I've thought about that question a lot. I've asked that question a lot. And what I have come to the conclusion of is it's not the trip to Hawaii. It's not going to Disney World, which we haven't done Hawaii yet, and we've done Disney World. And the funny thing is on the way back from Disney World a couple of years ago, we asked the kids, what was your favorite part? And I see you smiling. What do you think their favorite part was? And you don't know anything about the trip we did at Disney, but what do you think it was?
The thing that jumps into my mind is driving when you were driving in the car and some mishap happened.
Right. Yeah, it could have easily been that. It was me.
Yeah.
It was me throwing them in the hotel pool, just one after another, just chucking them over and over and over again, just throwing them up in the air. And I'll never forget.
Free.
Yeah,
And it was free.
it was free. And I'll never forget looking over at them being like, seriously? Like, we saw Magic Kingdom, like the big castle. Like, what? Like, I could have thrown you in the subdivision pool at home. Like, yeah, it's like you don't think that way, but you think that way. But to them, and I have a co-coach of mine who I've been working with for 6 years. He's got 3 girls, and same thing. He asked the girls, "Do you want to go to Magic?" You know, they were at Disney for a week, and he's like, "Do you guys want to go to Magic Kingdom or play on the splash pad today?" Because they had been going doing parks, and they all chose the splash pad. And in Jeff's mind, he was like, "Wow, really? That's easy." So going back, yeah, it's never these super elaborate, crazy things. It's reading the bedtime story about Eli's lemonade stand, right? It's coloring at a Starbucks. I used to um, I used to take my 15-year-old and my 16-year-old to Starbucks, and we'd go to Target and buy a $20 Lego set that had like 200 pieces, and we'd go get coffee and a donut and just put the thing together at Starbucks. And I was like, what's some of your favorite memories growing up? And we've done like trips and beaches and stuff like that. They're like, oh, I really liked when we put together Legos at Starbucks. I'm like, I was like, really? They're like, yeah. They're like, oh my God, that's like so easy. That was your dad not knowing what to do with you that day, and it was raining outside. And I was like, we could do that. And but that's the stuff they do remember. It's literally simplifying, because I think at the end of the day, man, it's not the trips, it's the connection. It's not the experience. Is it the experiences, but it's the experiences of connecting with you through the things that you're doing.
Yeah. And
So
it's those moments. I think as a child, I'm not a child psychologist, but I think they feel safe
yeah.
in those moments.
Hmm.
They feel safe and secure. And there's the environment, the situation where, those moments, I think, where the joy and the happiness that they feel based on the safety and security of perhaps an everyday moment. And, they're developing organic, growing beings that every 6 months, they're feeling they're unworthy given what they see out in the world with social media and among their friends and what their friends' parents are driving, the Range Rovers and, all these things. And at the end of the day, it's, their safety and security is that dad is there. And here we are on a Saturday screwing around with a Lego set at Starbucks. But I think there's just something there in the condition that um, there's something divine and spiritual there.
Totally agree with that, man. Divine and spiritual. I love that, man. Um, this has been really unexpected. I thought we were going to be talking about lemonade stands and starting businesses for kids, but it went and we hit that. But in my mind, I think we put it on steroids as well. So thank you for just being so authentic and just opening up your life for us, especially some of the things that I know are not easy to talk about. So thank you for that, man.
Well, it's a total honor. And like I've said, whether it was at the beginning of this or before we hit record, congratulations on what you've done with your business. And it's a worthwhile mission, especially in today's chaotic, uncertain, unstable world. So any level of security that you can provide to fathers under these changing circumstances, way to go. Congratulations. And I'm stoked to be a part of it in whatever small way, shape, or form.
Well, thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Unselfishly, this is a great resource for men out there. And selfishly, it helps me with those chaotic, turbulent, and crazy storms that I am not immune to, that I still feel them on like a daily basis. I always tell like I just got my Jeep wrapped,
Yes.
so I got it all like dad edged out and all that, live legendary, and it says relentless on the side as well. And my 16-year-old goes, relentless. I go, yeah, not every day. I was like, I try every day. Some days I'm successful and some days I'm not. And I told my oldest Ethan, I was like, if anything Dad Edge has done for me is it's helped me increase my batting average. So instead of batting 1 or 200 on those days I need to be relentless, I get to bat 6, 7, 800. I still strike out 2, 3, 4 times, but the batting average is a lot higher. I was like, there's only one perfect man that walked the earth, and I'm not him.
Right.
Right. So this was great, man. I want to make sure that the guys can find you, connect with you. Obviously, this amazing book or whatever other resources you have out there. Where can men find you?
Well, the children's book can be sort of viewed at startupkid.net, startupkid.net. And then that's related to my startup consulting business, which is venturesuperfly.com. So, but thank you for that.
You bet. Gentlemen, we're going to have all the links in the show notes. So we'll even put John's LinkedIn and his socials and all that good stuff in there. So he's not hard to find. Not to worry, gentlemen. Head on over to thedadedge.com/Friday 9090. That's 90. thedadedge.com/90. I have the book. Me and Lawson and Colton have been reading the book. We really, really love it. It's sparked, as you guys have heard, some amazing discussions between, especially Lawson on the way to soccer, of what it means to start a value-driven business. And maybe we can do that as well with our kids. They don't necessarily have to have a job. They can have a value-driven entrepreneurial business that serves people and fixes their problems. So, John, thanks for creating this resource for us and for our kids. And I'm excited for you, man.
It's an honor. Thank you very much.
You bet. Gentlemen, go out, live legendary. Take care.